Moedim l'simcha, Chag Sameach, friends. We are gathered here for our second Zoom Congregational Seder. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to take a minute to welcome everybody who is participating on Zoom, participating on YouTube. If you have a part in the Seder and are participating on YouTube, we're not going to be able to hear you. So I'm going to ask you to hop onto your Zoom link so that we can have you participate as part of the Seder. It's a joy that we're able to do this, to be together. I'm going to ask Cantor to share screen for our Haggadah. Hopefully you have your own Haggadah with you. Any Haggadah will do. While we're using a different night tonight, any Haggadah will do the job for you. To help you follow along. And hopefully we'll get a chance, maybe we'll do a little tour on Zoom of Haggadot, what Haggadahs people are using, that sort of thing. But this is going to be how we're going to be doing this. And we're going to start by turning to the blessing of our holiday lights. Even though it is the second night, it is still Hag, and so we're going to bless our candles. So I'm going to turn things over to Cantor to go ahead and lead us in that blessing.
And Rabbi, before I get started, because it is the first time we are gathering as a community, we are still going to do Shehechianu, correct?
Yeah.
Avoiding the cat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel yom tov. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. And hopefully you had the chance to light your candles along with us. We turn now to the order of the Seder, which is sort of like saying pita bread. Or rather, we turn to the blessing of our children. Hopefully we have our children nearby. So if you are there if you have your male children nearby, we say over them, Yisimcha Elohim Ephraim v'chinemashet. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. For our female children, we say, Yismech Elohim Kasara Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May God make you like Sarah and Rebecca, Rachel and Leah. And for all of our children, we say over them, of any age, by the way, one is never too old to receive a blessing from one's parents. We say over all of them, Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God's face shine upon you and favor you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasam lecha shalom. May God's face turn to you and grant you peace. And from there, we go to the order of the Seder. Seder means order, and so there is an order to what we're doing. For tonight's celebration, we're going to do like what we did last year. We're only going up through the second cup, and through Motzi Matzah. We're only going to be going through the Magid, and stopping right before the meal, and then allowing you to finish up the Seder on your own. But we're going to hear the order of the Seder of the Seder, the various steps, and we're going to turn things back over to Cantor to lead us in.
Kadesh Urechas Apas Yachatz Magid Rachsta Motzi Matzah Ma'or Korech Shulchan Orech Tzavon Barech Halel
So we know what we're doing now, right? Close enough. We're going to now continue with Kiddush. We're going to share the screen for Kiddush. We should have wine, or you can actually make Kiddush over anything but water. But traditionally, we think of it as being wine or grape juice or some other grape product in that regard. So I'm going to ask us to have our cups at the ready as our cantor leads us in Kiddush with Shehechianu.
We raise our glasses. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'am v'ramamanu mikol hashon v'kidashanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, את יום חג המצות הזה. זמן חירותנו, מקרא קודש, זכר לציון, ליציאת מצרים. כי ובחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל עמים. I'll just look here. Where is it? Rabbi, I'm just looking for the text. I'm looking for the text. I got lost. Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael V'hazmanim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
Amen. L'chaim. So we go from Kiddush, and for our first of 4 cups of wine, again, we're doing 2 together. The other 2 are on your own. We turn to our first hand washing, or chatz. It's important for us to remember that this is not a sanitary hand washing. This is a ritual hand washing. This is to get us and to remind us, as so many of the rituals of the Seder, to remind us that tonight is for asking questions and to create opportunities to ask questions. So we do a lot of things that we normally wouldn't do in order to make sure that people are asking questions and that we're inquiring of each other. So for those for whom it is a tradition to do orachatz, we encourage you to do so. And then we're going to move on to karpas, to the dipping of our spring greens into the salt water. The spring greens remind us of spring. The salt water, of course, the tears that we shed in our suffering, and probably should add all the tears that we shed as we think of all those who are suffering. Before we do so, for those of us who are on Zoom, if you want to share a little bit, if you want to do a little tour of your Seder plate, or tell people in the chat about your Seder plate, if there's something special about it. Was it a family relative? Did you get it as a wedding present? If you'll pardon me with my camera here, as everything's going to go swimmy for a second. So we received this Seder plate as a wedding gift. You can't see the matzah plate, but that goes with it. And the Elijah's cup was actually a gift from a former congregant when I worked in Cincinnati, who made it on his own lathe, which is really lovely. So if you have something special and you want to share in the chat of what's going on with your Seder plate, what special traditions you have with your Seder plate, or for those on YouTube, if you want to post something special about your Seder plate, that would be lovely. But in the meantime, we take up our parsley or our other spring green. We dip in the salt water that we have, and we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'adama. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth.
Amen.
And now we ruminate. From Karpas, we go to Magid. The responsibility to tell the story of the Exodus, to tell the story of our Pesach experience, of our escape from Egypt of old, and as we continue to look for redemption in each and every age. Because while we went out from Egypt only once, we know that redemption comes in every generation in different ways. But we begin with a discussion of the bread of affliction, as we used to read it. And for Halach Ma'anya, we turn to our past president, Kim Von Welton, to lead us in that reading. So, Kim, you are on.
This is the bread of poverty and persecution that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. As it says in the Torah, 7 days shall you eat matzot, the bread of poverty and persecution, so that you remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal. This year, we are still here. Next year, in the land of Israel. This year, we are still slaves. Next year, free people.
Thank you for doing that. And boy, do the words, this year we are still here, resonate differently for us doing our Seders on Zoom and on YouTube than they may have in other years. We are still here. On the other hand, we are still here. And we're mindful of those who unfortunately are not. But we are grateful for our ability to still be here. I said before that Seder is all about questions. Pesach is all about questions. And so we turn to the 4 questions. And traditionally, if you look in the Mishnah, these are actually supposed to be prompted by a parent. But today we understand that these are supposed to be recited by a child. And Savannah, are you there? You ready to go ahead? Yeah, you ready to go ahead and lead us?
Yeah.
Great, it's all you.
Anuhim hametzu matzah, hametzu matzah, halayla hazeh, kulo matzah, halayla hazeh, kulo matzah, shebeho halelot. Anuhim she'ayakot, halayla hazeh, maror, halayla hazeh, maror, sheveho halelot. Ein anu matbilin afilu pam echat, halayla hazeh, shetef ve'amim, halayla hazeh, shetef ve'amim, sheveho halelot. Anuhim bein yoshvein o yuvein mesuvin, bein yoshvein bein mesuvin, halayla hazeh, kulanu mesuvin, halayla hazeh, kulanu mesuvin.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Savannah. That was great. Thank you so much for leading us in that. That was great. So we continue. Now that we've asked questions, now it is our time to start answering. And so we go to the bottom there of our screen. Or actually, we go to the top. When in time to come your children ask you, what is the meaning of the decrees, laws, and rules that Adonai our God has enjoined upon you, you shall say to your children, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Adonai freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Adonai produced before our eyes great and awful signs and wonders in Egypt against Pharaoh and all Pharaoh's household. And God freed us from there so that God could take us and give us the land that has been promised on oath to our ancestors. And so we join with the cantor in singing Avadim Hayinu. That's right there underneath the little cartoon character on the screen.
Avadim hayinu, hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin. Avadim
The actual Zoom meeting.
hayinu, ata b'nei chorin,
Us
b'nei
from there.
chorin.
Thank you, Cantor, for leading that. Just a reminder to all of our participants that unless they want to show up on YouTube, now's a good time to mute yourself, even when you're coming in. But it's good to have you all here. We have joined in singing that, and we continue on with our Seder. And we read, of course, we have to read the story of the longest Seder. If you think your Seder was long, you are wrong. Because the tale is told of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar, son of Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon, that they were reclining at the Seder in Bnei Brak, and they spent the whole night long telling the story of the going out of Egypt until their pupils came and said to them, our masters, it is time to recite the morning Shema. So if you think your Seder is long, it is not. Not by comparison, not by a long shot. How many of you ever get assigned that reading at the Seder and find that all of a sudden you have to do a whole bunch of names that you're not familiar with? We move forward and we move on to our four children. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenatan Torah La'amo Yisrael Baruch Hu. The Torah alludes to four children, one wise, one wicked, one simple, and one who does not know how to ask. And in fact, each of the children quote from the Torah. Each of the children are associated with different times that the Torah recognizes that later descendants, later generations are going to ask, what is this ritual that we're doing? And as Rabbi Grumbacher used to teach, each of the four children is in each and every single one of us. And so we are attentive to them as best as we can. So let us continue with our four children. What does the wise child say? What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which Adonai our God has commanded you? You must tell some of the laws of Pesach, for example, from the Mishnah, where it says, we do not proceed to any afikoman, dessert, or after-dinner celebrations after eating the Pesach. What does the wicked child say? What does this service mean to you? The child, which, by the way, in the Torah, there's no implication that the person asking this is wicked. It's a natural question. But we understand that the child's emphasis of to you and not to him or herself, since the child excludes himself or herself from the community and rejects a major principle of faith, you should set that child's teeth on edge and say, it is because of this that Adonai did for me when I went free from Egypt. Me and not that one. Had that one been there, they would not have been redeemed. From there, we go to, we've done Chacham and Rasha, we go to Tam. Tam, Mahu Omer. What does the simple child ask? Mazot, what is this? And you shall say to that child, by a mighty hand, Adonai brought us out of Egypt and the house of bondage. And the child who does not know how to ask, you should prompt him or her or them, as it is said, you should tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of this that Adonai did for me when I went free from Egypt. Normally, I would get to tell you that now we get to skip a whole bunch of pages, but there's not really any skipping pages because we're doing the screen. we're doing the screen. And we continue. Actually, we're going to do one more screen. We're going to skip this one. There we go. And one more after that, if you would. Sorry, Canner. There we go. And we go on to Arami Oved Avi. I was saying last night at my own Seder, of all the traditions of Pesach, this is the one, the oldest one that we have, unless you're slaughtering a lamb and cooking it and painting your door with its blood, in which case probably the SPCA is going to call you, and the health department. But this is the oldest tradition that we have that we are still doing as part of Pesach, the recitation of these words. Arami Oved Avi, I'm going to do it off my sheet. Ve'yered Mitzrayma v'yegad sham b'matei me'at v'hi sham l'goy gadol atzum v'rav v'yareu otanu hamitzrayim v'ya'anunu v'yitnu aleinu avodah kasha v'nitzak el Adonai Elohei avotenu v'imotenu v'yishma Adonai et kolenu v'yar et onyenu Ve'et amalenu, ve'et lechatzenu, ve'yotzienu Adonai mimitzrayim, biyad chazaka, v'yizro nituya, v'mora gadol, v'otot, v'moftim, v'yavienu el hamakom hazeh, v'yitain lanu et haaretz hazot, eretz avat chalav udvash, which, as we can read there, my ancestor was a wandering Aramean. He descended to Egypt and resided there in small numbers. He became a nation, great, powerful, and numerous. The Egyptians treated us badly. They persecuted us and put us under hard labor. We cried out to Adonai, the God of our ancestors. God heard our voice. God saw our persecution, our toil, and our oppression. God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, with awesome power, signs, and wonders. God brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land of milk and honey. Now I have brought the first fruits of this soil, which you, God, gave me. From there, we go to page 45. Well, no, we'll do 43. That's okay. Oh, well, I'm giving the cantor a run for her money. God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, with awesome power, signs, and wonders. God took us out not by the hands of an angel, not by the hands of a messenger, but the Holy One, blessed be, with God's own glory. Just as it says, I will pass through the land of Egypt, and I will strike down every firstborn in Egypt, both human and beast. I will execute judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am God. And now we continue as we prepare to do the plagues. I've seen all kinds of alternative plagues recently. And a rabbi I follow online made an interesting comment that when you associate modern issues with the plagues, what we're doing unintentionally is we're actually siding with Pharaoh. We are saying that all of the plague of COVID-19, the plague of all things matter, the plague of not or all lives matter, the plague of injustice, that these plagues should not be meted out. But our text tells us that these plagues needed to be meted out on the Egyptians. We're not supposed to be happy about that. Redemption has a cost. Freedom has a cost, and that cost is high. It is not done easily, and it's important for us to remember that, and that is why we do the plagues. The plagues were not done to us. They were done to those who opposed us, who opposed our freedom, but we are not happy about that. We're not rejoicing in that. So it's important not to confuse the metaphor. But in doing that, we also get to make fun songs about it, because why not? And so we turn to one of my favorite songs, the frog song, and Sarah Kittinger is going to lead us in that.
One morning when Pharaoh woke in his bed, there were frogs in his bed and frogs on his head, frogs on his toes and frogs on his nose, frogs here, frogs there, frogs were jumping everywhere.
I appreciate the hat. The hat makes it. The costume makes it. And one of my favorite debates, of course, is the plague is called Sfardeia, not Sfardeot. It is frog, not frogs. So depending on which side of the rabbis you sit, one option is lots and lots and lots of tiny frogs, which the song gave us, or one giant Godzilla-like frog. You decide which is a worse plague. With that, we turn the page and we pour out a bit of, or dip out with finger or spoon or whatever utensil you grew up with, a little bit of our joy, a little bit of our wine. And so, dam, blood. Sfardeia, frogs or frog. Kinim, lice. Arov, wild beasts. Dever, cattle plague. Shchin, boils. Arad, hail. Arbeh, locusts. Choshech, darkness. And makat bachorot, the death of the firstborn. No one likes to talk about that one. I can't imagine why. And we know, I said before, that redemption comes in different ways, in different generations, not just for us, but for those who sympathize with us, those who recognize the plight of the Jewish people as their own plight, see in that historical plight their own experience. For a long time, as Jews in sympathy with the African-American community in the civil rights movement, we have sung Let My People Go, the African-American spiritual, not to take it over, but in recognizing that their plight so much looks like our own plight, and that we have a special sympathy and a special responsibility to help and be present with them. So we're going to invite Jan Zimmerman to lead us in Let My People Go.
There we go. I chose to sing this song because I used to teach it in school. I was an elementary school music teacher, and we taught this song as part of Black History Month. It is an African-American song, but it's also song about Moses and the Exodus. And what was fascinating to me was how this story inspired other people in other times and other people who were slaves. Moses shows up again and again in songs in the slavery period in our country. And it's come full circle because now the song that the African-American slaves wrote has come back, and we use it as part of our Seder. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Let my people go. Thus spoke the Lord, old Moses said, let my people go, or else I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. No children in bondage toil, let my people go. Let them come out with Egypt's spoil, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Let my people go. And I'm going to sing one more verse that I know because this is how I taught it when I taught it. When Israel stood by the waterside, My people go on God's command, it did divide. Let my people go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, down Pharaoh, let my people go.
Asher Kawach, and thank you, Chan, for sharing that. So I was having this conversation this morning with somebody where I was saying, from the middle, part of the purpose of the Magid, part of the purpose of the Seder is to tell the story, but a lot of it is also to express gratitude, to be in a posture of gratitude. Gratitude for our redemption, gratitude for all the wonders that God has done for us at this season and in history. And so one of the ways we express gratitude is singing Dayenu. You're missing my Dayenu t-shirt. I wore it last night. You'll have to take my word for it. But we're going to join in singing Dayenu with our cantor, who's going to share. She put a little red star. The red doesn't mean anything. It's just that was the star that showed up on the page. Don't read into that. But she's going to lead us in Ilu Hotzianu Mi Mitzrayim, had God taken us out of Egypt. Natan Lanu Et HaShabbat, given us the Sabbath. Natan Lanu Et HaTorah, given us Torah. And Hechnisanu LeEretz Yisrael, brought us into the land of Israel. Those are our verses. We know how to sing it, so we're going to turn to our cantor to lead it.
So the red stars are going to be next to the verses we're singing. I'd forgotten that it was on 2 slides. So, Ilu Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et Shabbat, Natan lanu et Shabbat, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et Torah, Natan lanu et Torah, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Hichnisanu. I always mess this one up, Rabbi.
You want me to take this one over?
Yes.
Ilu Hichnisanu LeEretz Yisrael, Hichnisanu LeEretz Yisrael, Dayenu. Back to you, cantor.
Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Rabbi, would you mind explaining that last verse?
Hichnisanu LeEretz Yisrael?
So it's from, it's a particular, we don't.
Had God only brought us to the land of Israel, but not built for us, not given us the Bayit, Jerusalem, then that would have been enough.
So I think in some families we may have grown up singing that verse, and in some families not. And
it's a good Zionist verse. It's a good Zionist verse. But it's an opportunity for us to think about what are we grateful for. And I would ask you to think about, what are you grateful for? What are the things that only this would have been enough, but I got so much more. all those moments in our lives where we reflect on that. We can turn the page as we start reflecting on the symbols on our Seder plates. Hopefully you've got your Seder plate nearby. I am going to allude to the shank bone, but I am not, or the beet. Sometimes it's a beet. I know several people this year either had a stuffed animal instead of the shank bone, or just wrote shank bone on a piece of paper and put it on the plate. Lots of creative ways to have our Seder plates. But we are supposed to reflect, according to Rabban Gamliel, on three things. There, all who have not explained the significance of three things during the Pesach Seder have not yet fulfilled their duty. The three are Pesach, lamb, the matzah, and maror. And so I'm not going to point to the shank bone. You hopefully have a shank bone nearby. I know Zach, Cantor's fiance, Zach Pellin, made lamb and then used the shank bone for their shank bone. So, and made it bespoke, which is always lovely. So Pesach al Shumma, the Pesach. Why did we used to eat it? Or if you're Sephardi, why do you still eat lamb? But it's not the Pesach. To remind ourselves that God passed over our ancestors' houses. Moses had already instructed us, when your children ask you, what do you mean by this ceremony? You shall say it is the Passover offering to Adonai, the Pesach offering to Adonai, because God passed over or protected the houses of Israel in Egypt when God struck the Egyptians, but saved our houses. That is the first thing we're supposed to reflect on. Next, we reflect on the matzah. Hopefully we have matzah handy. Matzah al zosha anu ochlin al shumma. This matzah, why do we eat it? To remind ourselves that even before the dough of our ancestors in Egypt had time to rise and become leavened, Adonai, the Holy One, revealed the divine self and redeemed them. The Torah says they baked unleavened cakes of the dough they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. And we should have our maror. Marissa graded this last night. Compliments to the chef. Maror al shumma, this maror, why do we eat it? To remind ourselves that the Egyptians embittered our ancestors' lives. They embittered their lives with hard labor, with mortar and bricks, and with all sorts of field labor. Whatever the task, they worked them ruthlessly. Now, many of us have other symbols on the Seder plate. We continue to have an orange on the Seder plate, which was, some people think that, and it has become for some people a symbol of the inclusion of women in Judaism. But Susanna Heschel reminds everyone at every opportunity she can, since she created the ritual, that it is actually for the inclusion of all those who would be excluded, including and especially LGBT individuals. But sometimes we have also seen potato peels, potato skins to remind people of the suffering during the Holocaust, other symbols on the Seder plate. What are some of the symbols you have on your Seder plate that are maybe from your family or maybe a tradition you picked up along the way? Reflect on that in this moment. Regardless, we are supposed to understand not just that our ancestors went out of Egypt, but that we ourselves went out of Egypt. And so for that, I'm going to ask Leslie Ann to unmute and to lead us in this reading, Bechol Dor Vador. Leslie Ann, we're just waiting for you to unmute so we can hear you.
I just asked her to unmute. So.
Same. We'll give her a minute. It's okay. This is one of the dilemmas of doing this online, is that this is often a struggle. We'll read this together, and Leslie Ann, once you're able to unmute, we'll give you another reading to do. In every generation, one is obligated to see oneself as one who personally went out from Egypt. Just as it says, you shall tell your children on that very day, it's because of this that God did for me when I went from Egypt. Not only were our ancestors redeemed by the Holy One, but even we were redeemed with them. Just as it says, God took us out from there in order to bring us and to give us the land God swore to our ancestors. One of the other ways we express gratitude is through Hallel, by reciting Hallel. And so we are going to join in the first part of our Hallel, especially Psalm 114. And Kendra's going to lead us in that.
בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז. בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז. הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל ממשלותיו. Hayam Ravi Yanos, Hayarden, Yisov le'achor, B'tzeit Yisrael, Mitzrayim, Bet Yaakov, Me'am lo'ez, B'tzeit Yisrael, Mitzrayim, Bet Yaakov, Me'am lo'ez, Harim raketu che'elim, Giva'ot kivnei tzon, Malecha hayam kitanus, Hayarden tisov le'achor, B'tzeit Yisrael mitzrayim, Bet Yaakov me'am lo'ez, B'tzeit Yisrael mitzrayim, Bet Yaakov me'am lo'ez.
Right. We're ready for that second cup, that cup of redemption. So we lift up our cups. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who redeemed us and redeemed our ancestors from Egypt, who brought us to this night to eat matzah and maror. Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, may you bring us in peace to future holidays. May we celebrate them in your rebuilt city. May we celebrate them together, I would add. And may we be able to eat the Pesach with all the sacrifices offered on the altar. Well, maybe not that, but that's okay. We thank you for our redemption. Blessed are you, Redeemer of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim. If it is your tradition to partake in the ritual washing, nitilat yadayim, now is the time to do so for rachatzah. And we prepare to actually begin with the ritual eating of the meal. There are two blessings for matzah. One is hamotzi, because this is still bread. This is bread. Lachma anya, the bread of affliction, but bread nonetheless. And then for the fulfilling of the mitzvah of eating matzah. And so we have our piece of matzah. Andy, everybody's favorite. It's got to be real matzah unless you're a child or you've got a medical condition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah.
Amen.
Crunchy. And now everybody's favorite, we turn to maror. It's my favorite. I like the spice. We add a little bit on your piece of matzah for delivery purposes, unless you are the kind of person who likes to just eat the horseradish root itself, a little sliver of it itself, or you want to use celery as a delivery method. because you don't want anything to distract you from that real bitter taste, you are welcome to do so. And we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. She did a good job. That's good. And now we come to the part that everybody actually likes, which is the charoset. We do a Sephardic style charoset in our house. You might do an Ashkenazi style charoset. There are other charoset recipes out there. We put a little bit of charoset, which is supposed to represent the mortar. And of course, there is the famous story about from the Civil War where they did not have charoset or the rest of the ingredients for it. So they put an actual brick on the table. I believe they were doing that. One of our congregational families was doing that this year in memory of somebody who found that story very much appealing. We put that together with the horseradish in memory of Hillel's sandwich, where he combined Pesach, matzah, and maror and ate them together, which is, if we were at Torah study this past week and we listened in Friday night at services, we learned that that's how you're supposed to eat the Pesach. Anyway, that's how you're supposed to eat any offering anyway. So we put them together and enjoy. Still crunchy. From here, we're going to release you to your meal, shulchan or ref. I hope you have a Haggadah nearby so that afterwards you can do afikomen on your own. You can do Birkat Hamazon on your own. The second part of Hallel, the last 2 cups, welcoming Elijah into your household. That you'll be able to do that on your own. But we're glad that we're able to celebrate this part with